So thank you to Cohesity for sponsoring today's TED Talk and presenting. It'll be on what to do before ransomware attack hits. And we'll be hearing from Derek Bird, who is a sales engineer with Cohesity, and Tony Callahan, who is a senior account executive with Cohesity today. Just as a reminder, there is an opportunity to win a Solo Stove Ranger, and we'll be sending a follow-up email with this recording and more information for how to opt in on that. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Tony to give a little bit more of an intro for today's presentation.
Yeah, good morning. My name's Tony Callahan. I'm an account executive based right here in Nashville. I joined Cohesity last year from most of my background being in Dell EMC. The topic of today is to more kind of pinpoint on the ransomware use cases, but I can kind of just give a brief high-level 30-second overview of Cohesity real quick before we do, just so you kind of have a understanding of who we are and what we do, what kind of use cases we solve. Our kind of mission here, Cohesity, is to radically simplify data management for the modern era. So we're a software company, so we can be, completely on-prem on a variety of different hardware solutions. We can be in your own public clouds or a hybrid of each, or we can actually be run completely in the cloud as a service. Our founder prior to Cohesity was actually the founder and technical brains behind Nutanix. So kind of giving birth to that hyperscale, hyper-converged architecture. Prior to that, he was the kind of lead architect for developing the Google file system. The only reason I bring both of those up is the fact that we're able to do what we do at Cohesity is because we own the file system. So, being able to be a backup solution, a storage solution, tests, dev, cloning, instant recovery on Cohesity itself. And of course, the built-in ransomware is all because we own the file system. So I didn't want to talk too much about everything else since today is supposed to be about ransomware, but we have a short, maybe 30, 45-minute presentation today on how we, detect and prevent against ransomware with Cohesity. So I'll turn it over to Derek. He's actually a former Cohesity customer. So, like the technology so much, he wanted to come work for us. So Derek, I'll let you kick it off, man.
Thanks so much, Tony. Well, hey, everyone. This is Derek. My background is in data center and infrastructure leadership. And so I've invested in Cohesity. I've invested in a lot of different backup products over the years. I've experienced ransomware attacks. I've been able to recover from ransomware attacks. I've talked to a lot of customers of Cohesity that, thankfully they had all of the right security settings in place to protect their backups from ransomware. And then I've talked to, potential customers who maybe weren't so lucky that either had to pay a ransom or just had a really bad week as far as dealing with ransomware. So kind of what we'll talk about today is just kind of the state of ransomware, what all we're seeing out in the news, how things are going, and then an example of a ransomware attack, exactly what's happening, what we're seeing out there, and then Cohesity security. How are we protecting from that? And maybe not even just Cohesity security settings, but just in security settings in general that we should be looking for out there in the market. So cyber threats, this is a big business that's out there. They're making real money. They have their own help desk teams to help you pay them money whenever you want to get your decryption keys to unlock your data. They're more than willing to help you do that if you just pay them in Bitcoin or whatever kind of monetary method they're asking about. But this really is a massive, massive problem to organizations. These are organizations that, the government agencies, organizations that maybe hold our healthcare information, organizations that hold our banking information. So this is a real threat, not just to companies, but to us as individuals, because our data is out there, and hopefully these companies are protecting our data and not having to pay ransom to recover data and keep their systems online. And we don't just think about, what the cost of the ransom is. What is the cost to the business? The cost to the reputation to a business? How can you put a price tag on that? How does that affect the business's sales, their operations, loss in productivity of their workforce. Then that affects the workforce. If they have to send them home for days and weeks on end until they can recover, that affects their paychecks. So it's hitting all of us, and it needs to be taken very, very seriously. And as we start to see more in the news, this last year we saw really targeted attacks on healthcare organizations. A few months before that, we were seeing government agencies being really targeted, because a lot of times government agencies and healthcare agencies, those types of industries are some of the later adopters of newer technology, of more modern security features that are out there today. And a lot of times, maybe companies just don't allocate the budget as fast to get those things, because they don't provide an immediate return on investment until there is actually an attack. And now it's actually becoming illegal to pay ransom to cyber criminals. So not only are you having to pay money to unlock your data, you could be facing further fines or even jail time coming up. So I'm interested to see where that's going to head in the future. And now we're going to start with kind of a customer story about exactly what happened in their environment. And we can expand a little bit about other things that we're seeing out there. So customer has a remote site, and maybe those users haven't been trained as often as they should have been on do not click on all of these random links, do not open emails that you're not sure who it came from. But that's typically how they get installed. They're doing some type of social engineering or email phishing, and then ransomware gets installed on that machine. And at that point, it could sit dormant for a while. They could be installing keyloggers. They could be searching through password hashes, trying to find local admin accounts, and then they can spread amongst multiple machines that maybe share the same local admin passwords. Hopefully, we're not using those same passwords in the server environment, but they're still able to move around and maybe start looking for those domain admin accounts. And once they have that level of permission, that's when kind of a nightmare begins. And so when the ransomware installs and then they have access to spread their encryption services, in this case, there were 400 Windows servers that got encrypted. In some organizations, that's every server. And some larger ones, that might not be a massive, outbreak there. But any of us on the call will probably think that's a really bad infection there for 400 servers to get attacked. And then the users come in, they can't access these systems. They're sitting there just calling the help desk. What are you guys going to do about this? And at that point, they're facing kind of their ransom screen. And we'll zoom in on this thing. So typically it's pay via Bitcoin to this account. Now, I don't know about you guys. Does any of you know if your company has a Bitcoin account and how easily accessible that is? Most of our companies do not. And then it's either, the payment's going to raise up at this point, or the encryption keys are just going to be deleted at a certain time. So there's a time frame that it's really making you try to rush through this and get this and get the payment done quickly. And then other times, whether if we're talking about healthcare data or something like that, they might be even threatening to expose the data and to really cause a lot of harm to the reputation of your company. And so in this case, this customer had to pay the Bitcoin. And then it didn't stop there. A lot of times you say, all right, we've paid the ransom, now we're all good. That's when you have to really start working. So at that point, they received a Google Sheet with 400 unmarked keys. And now it's basically like trying 400 doors and you just have a bag of keys there. You're trying 400 times until you find the right key. And on that next door, you have to try 399 times to get that next key. So you can see how long this could actually take to do that. But then once you start to see that, all right, I found a key that works, I can start decrypting this server. Well, it doesn't just decrypt the file in place. It's actually going to make a copy of that file and decrypt it right next to the encrypted copy. And so you start to think about your servers. What I see out in the marketplace today is most servers are running 60 to maybe 75% utilized. meaning they're over halfway full. If they're over halfway full and we're trying to make a separate copy of all these files to decrypt them, those servers are going to start blue screening. They're going to run out of space and those are going to crash. So now you've got to start this shuffle game, this shell game of where do I find enough storage to decrypt this data? Or how fast can you get a PO cut to get some new storage in there so you can decrypt this data and start to get your systems back online? So you can see this is a really, really bad situation to be in, because it's not just let's decrypt the data. Now we've got to have all this space available to be able to recover this data to. And then in this case, this was just a few days of an outage. I guess I say just a few days. That could be catastrophic to several companies. I know with in the days, I guess last year when COVID started really affecting the U.S. and all of a sudden, businesses were closing, it was just a matter of weeks and months till a lot of businesses had to close their doors for good. So if your company is down for a significant amount of time, that could be the difference of the survival of that company. And so what we see that happened is, they target the user and then they're going after the production servers. But also they're looking on the network for password vaults, and start to ask yourself things like, where am I storing my passwords? Am I storing my service account passwords on my network? Do I have some kind of password vault? Hopefully it's not just in maybe a Word document or a password protected Excel file, something like that. And if you are storing your passwords on your network, are you separating out the passwords for your production environment and making them completely segregated from the passwords that you store for your backup environment? So what Cohesity is doing is we're locking the data down at the file system level. Most pieces of backup software, they're just moving data from production and putting it on some target. So if you're providing ransomware protection, you're doing it at the target storage layer. If there's a piece of backup software out there saying that they're providing ransomware protection, you need to dig a lot deeper into that, because it has to be done where the data is stored. So whether it's stored in the cloud or whether it's stored on some type of on-prem device, that's where you need to be applying your security layers there. So whenever we lock down our file system, after that, we've proven that we can prevent the ransomware from getting to your backups. Next are the recovery steps. How fast can we get those 400 machines back online? And so here we'll kind of walk through some of these security features. And these are ones that are provided by Cohesity, but hopefully most of the other platforms that you guys are using out there, this is a thing that you guys have, that you're able to use these features and enable them today. So we're starting over here at this number one. How all of the different compliance features and all of the like common criteria, PCI compliance, FIPS compliance. This is, are you encrypting the data at rest? Is the data, following all of the standards? The storage platform, is it following all of the standards that a storage platform should be following to meet all of the compliance regulations that are out there today? So we're listing some of the compliance regulatory, I guess, common criteria, FIPS compliance. Those are some of the ones that we follow. It's not an exhaustive list of all of them. And next we're moving over to kind of the second bullet point, secure by design. The way we're storing the data is we're providing immutability at the file system level. So that means that this data cannot be encrypted. As soon as the data is written to the platform, we're taking a snapshot of it, and then we're never ever exposing that gold copy of your backups. And this is encryption in flight, whether we're replicating to DR or archiving to the cloud, as well as encryption at rest. Another security feature you'll see there is worm compliance, write once, read many. And that is a feature that we have called data lock. So that is separating out the ability to delete the data once it hits the platform. So what we're seeing a lot of out there today, a ransomware attack, whenever they're going after your backups, one, they're trying to encrypt the data so that way they could decrypt it, and you could, once you pay, you could recover that data. The second thing they're going to try to do is they're just going to try to delete the backups. They're going to try to legitimately authenticate to your backup environment and just start deleting files right from your backup interface. And then if they can't do that, they're going after the target location where you're storing the backup data, and they just want to destroy that. And so they're looking out for, whether it be, I don't know, we'll pick on a few. There's, data domains, your exagrids, things like that, other storage arrays. They just want to legitimately authenticate to those storage arrays and issue some destructive commands just to wipe those file systems out so that you cannot use that backup data. There's three things they're trying to do to the backup environment. So the first one, where they're trying to encrypt the data, the immutability of our file system stops them right there. They cannot encrypt this data. This cannot be accessed outside of the Cohesity cluster. Next, trying to delete the backups. This is where worm compliance comes in. So when we turn on our data lock features, even if the admin credentials were stolen, you still would not be able to delete those backups. But then that still leaves one other piece there. Can they just destroy a whole cluster or a whole storage array? And that's where the most critical piece that I can't stress enough, for no matter what backup software or target appliance you're using out there today, multi-factor authentication. Leveraging a single sign-on tool like Okta or Duo or Ping, anything like that, forcing the authentication method to go to a single sign-on provider, and then they handle your multi-factor authentication requests. It's more than just a username and password. It might have to be that you log into an app and get a code out of there, or maybe you have to accept something on the app, or it's going to send you a text message with a code that you have to enter in. Some way to prevent authentication, because that is, I don't see a lot that they're actually hacking in a lot of networks. They're just searching the networks for your passwords. And once they get those passwords, then they can do everything that your admin could do. So we really want to lock those down, and multi-factor authentication is one of the biggest pieces out there. I was talking to a potential customer yesterday. He said, my backup appliance that I use today, it actually works pretty well for me. But I was going after trying to get cyber insurance, and the first thing they asked, whether or not, even if they will approve you for cyber insurance, is, do you have multi-factor authentication enabled on your backups? This will stop, 95% plus of all ransomware attacks on your backup environment. And this is what will enable you to save that data and be able to recover it. So really, really think about multi-factor authentication. Next is your role-based access controls in your backup environment. So don't always just hand out admin rights just because somebody's on the backup team. Do they really need that level of access? Should they be logging in with admin, or could they do that with maybe an operator role or a viewer role? And then once we've locked down the file system so that you cannot authenticate to it, you cannot delete those backups, next is we want to detect what's going on out there. And with Cohesity's Helios, we're actually monitoring every file in every VM. We know the change rate, we know the randomness of the data, we're scoring all of this information. And so that we can now report on that. We can alert on that to your admins to say, hey, these 5 or 10 servers, they had some suspicious behavior going on out there. Log into the security dashboard, and now you can see every single file that was affected on those servers. That is really valuable information that you can hand over to your security team or your compliance team to show, hey, there was no PII data that was affected or that was touched. This was all, here is a list of every single file that was affected. So now with our global search capabilities, our global index, we're able to know and search through everything very, very easily to show what was actually touched. And then let's say you actually did get hit. Several hundred servers were affected. Now it's time for instant mass recovery. Cohesity is a storage platform. We already hold all of this data. You've already accounted for that. We're going to mount our storage right back up to VMware. We're going to clone those VMs. We're never touching the gold copy. And when we're cloning those, these are actually read-writable copies of those VMs. So we're mounting up our NFS data stores right back to VMware and powering on those virtual machines. We don't have to move the data anywhere before it's usable. We're just providing you access to that data so that your system, your company can get back online. All of those servers are pingable. You can log into them, access your shares, your websites, all those services. They're back online. And then in the background, we can do a storage vMotion to move that data back to the production storage array. Or maybe the storage array no longer exists, it's been compromised. You can just run it off of Cohesity for a period of time until you get your production storage back online. So these are some of the ways that we really start to protect all of your data, and not just the protection of the data, but how do we get back online quickly? And this is what I was talking about instant mass restore. Your typical legacy backup environments will have to kick off a restore. There's a rehydration period if it's been deduped and compressed. And then depending on the size of the data as to how long it's going to take to move that back to production before your users can actually log into those VMs. On the Cohesity side, again, we are a storage platform. We're going to kick off that restore and we're going to mount those VMs up instantly. So we're talking a few minutes to get those online. And then once the user access is restored, then there's that storage vMotion, moving that data back to production. And now let's talk about all of the different recovery scenarios. So think about what you're using today for your backup environment, your disaster recovery environment. How long does it take you to recover a single file? That's a pretty easy thing. It's a low business impact, but it's pretty likely that that's going to happen. Users are going to delete files. And this is actually a POC results that came out of one of our customer POC environments. And so file deletion, that's going to happen pretty often. Just depends on how many you need to recover. That's not too big of a thing. Hopefully most backup software can recover those pretty quickly. The global search with Cohesity really helps out with that because you don't have to know where the data came from. You can just search everything for it. Next, a single VM corruption. It's still pretty low impact to the business depending on the VM that it is. But it could be likely that this is going to happen, fairly often, every other month or something like that. There could be some patch that goes wrong or config file that gets messed up or an admin deletes the wrong thing. What they were seeing is today, their time to recover was pretty high, a couple hours for a single VM. Their goal was sub 10 minutes. And with Cohesity, again, with the instant restore capabilities, this was under a minute and we had that virtual machine online. Stepping on down to where we get to more critical use cases. Storage volume gets corrupted or a whole storage array goes down. Now we're talking tens of VMs and even up into thousands of VMs in this case. Low likelihood, but the business impact could be very high. Or you think about Windows patches that go terribly wrong and they just start blue screening VMs. How long would it take us to recover at that scale? Or even what we've been talking about on the call today, how long would it take to recover from a massive ransomware attack when we're talking hundreds, even thousands of VMs? Again, we need to be planning for those certain types of events. The likelihood is pretty low, but the impact to your business would be, perhaps even catastrophic to the business, not just a high business impact. They wanted to be able to recover in less than 24 hours. And in this test, they tested a little over 2,000 VMs, got them online in under an hour, and then moved back to production storage within 4 hours. And this is the power of hyperconvergence, the power of a distributed file system like this, where we're using multiple nodes to handle this workload, to push it across the network, and also to serve up, operational, capabilities to those VMs while you need to be using those while they're doing the storage vMotion back to production. And again, you really have to look at your security framework of what you're using today. Are you using the same credentials to log into your production VMs that you do to log into your backup environment? Where are you storing those passwords? Is there any multi-factor authentication out there? Is there any worm level compliance on your backup files? Are you storing your backups on multiple media types and multiple locations? These are the things that unfortunately we have to think about today because of what, the state of ransomware out there today. So a few questions to ask today. How are we storing our passwords? This is a very basic question that we're asking to a lot of even our current customers today when we're doing security reviews, and even potential customers that we're talking to. Let's get those password vaults off the network. Let's separate them where you store, your production passwords versus your passwords for your backup environment. Separate those out. Maybe use some kind of automated tool where it changes the password on a regular basis. Something that I never actually had to look into in my career in IT management, IT operations, that was always handled by the compliance team, the legal team, and the risk teams, but cyber insurance. As backup administrators, as IT leaders, let's get a little more involved in that. Is it up to date? What all does it cover? Have they had any new requirements that we have to be meeting, in the last few months that we are not meeting? We need to think about that to make sure that we are covered here, because this is a business we're protecting. This isn't just IT, buttons and knobs that we're turning all the time. We need to focus on how we are supporting the business. Typically, wherever your cyber liability insurance lies, they may have access to a third-party security firm, but go ahead and identify who that is. Interview these companies. Who do you trust? Maybe they go ahead and start to do some security reviews for you guys. Just be ready to have that emergency number ready to call when something happens, because as we saw on the screenshot before, the clock is ticking. They're holding those keys at ransom, and if they delete those decryption keys, that could be the death of your data at that point. Implement multi-factor authentication, yesterday. Let's start to find out ways, even if we're not pushing out single sign-on across the entire organization, get a few licenses so you can at least protect your backups. Again, it's gonna happen to most of our organizations. How well we can minimize that risk and also be able to recover from that is where, I guess our value is in IT admins. So multi-factor authentication is a must-have. Role-based access controls. Do not just hand out admin rights just because somebody's, on the sysadmin team or on the backup team. That does not need to be something that is handled by everybody. And also think about implementing worm level compliance. Obviously, that's a very serious thing to turn on. You cannot delete those files. They have to expire based off of their policy. But when it comes time to thinking about ransomware attacks, we need that level of security. Let's start thinking about where we're archiving the data, whether it be tape or some kind of excuse me, cloud bucket. For example, AWS has their bucket lock where they can add worm level compliance onto your buckets. And then the recovery capabilities of your backup solution. How fast can you get files recovered, individual VMs recovered, or massive amounts of VMs to be recovered? This is where we need to start thinking, because when ransomware hits, they're looking at us in the IT shop. How did you protect us, and how are you going to recover from this? Well, guys, that's what I have for you today. I will hand it back over to Tony to kind of wrap us up. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, we've already compiled an email to reach out to everyone that signed up. So if you have any questions or follow up, or you'd like to meet locally, just let us know. But we really appreciate the time. Let us know if you have any questions.
I did have a question, and it's more about the ransom, but is Bitcoin the only currency that's used for ransom, or is it just the primary currency?
Bitcoin is not the only one. There's several out there these days that, heck, many of us are actually investing in. But that's kind of the way to be able to make payments that are really hard to track, and there's no real government agencies monitoring those. So I guess in most of our experience, Bitcoin has been the one that's been the most popular. But they could ask for anything. This is hopefully we're not we're thinking about, the cyber insurance and, making sure that we have a way to handle that if that is our absolute worst case scenario. But I would much prefer to focus on the parts where we don't have to pay their ransom.
Yeah, I think the value of Bitcoin just plummeted this past week, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're picking another one these days.
Guys, I have a question. This is Chris Montini with M3 Technology Group. I thank you first for all this information. This has been great. Going along with your presentation, I'm thinking about our environment here, and we're good in a lot of these respects, but there are some weaknesses here. I'm wondering the question, I guess, about the Cohesity product is, what size companies does it fit? Does it scale to small companies? My business is, 140 employees and a couple of offices, branch offices. It's not very large, but we do have a VMware environment for our server set up. We use Office 365 for our productivity and email and all that, and UC and all that. And we do have a backup solution for that, but for our on-prem, our VMware environment, we've got a Barracuda solution that I've been looking to get rid of, not really get rid of, but upgrade it to something better that has better security. So just wondering, does Cohesity, would that fit my application?
Yeah, I mean, we see customers here in Tennessee of all shapes and sizes, Chris. I mean, I have to say our message definitely resonates with the larger clients because, they a lot of times they're so big, they've got so many tools doing so many different things. And having that fragmentation does nothing but increase the chance of, an attack or something being missed or, just a gap pretty much. But we also work with a lot of smaller, newer companies that they just, this is a software solution. We have some customers that run this on the small footprint as 3 nodes, and we have some that have hundreds. So it's really based on the use case. The fact is, we are a software platform that can do so much. So we realize sometimes the use case might be smaller to start with, like replacing exigrid or something like that, and then eventually they'll go more and further into the stack of doing maybe cloud or Office 365 backups or something. But we can start as little or as large as you want. So yeah, there's no real restrictions on company size.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll probably try to reach out and maybe get some more information, maybe have you guys take a look at what we're doing here, see if you can help.
Yeah, we'd love to. Let's see.
There's a question in chat.
Yep. I was wondering if that would come up this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where, the colonial pipeline, I think this has hit all of us. As we're buying gas these days, we've noticed probably a 30-40% increase in gas prices here recently. So from what articles I've read and just different speculation out there, they had some of the tools where they could have recovered. But, when you're talking about, and I guess some of the articles have said it was about a $5 million ransom. And so depending on the size of your organization, $5 million could crush you, or you could say, we're a multi-billion-dollar company. 5 million is not that bad. Let's pay that and get this data back that way, even though we're still trying to recover over here. So they could have been up against a time crunch where maybe they didn't know if they had good backups on everything, or they didn't know everything that had been hit. So things that could have done in hindsight to protect or prevent this: multi-factor authentication. Again, they're not doing anything super sophisticated out there. They're just legitimately trying to steal your passwords. And if you're using the same password across all of your different systems, whether that be in your personal life on your banking accounts or in your professional life on all the different systems there, please start changing those passwords. If they find one and it's used, amongst multiple accounts that are out there, that is also a big thing. So I guess, yeah, kind of what the last slide I showed, multi-factor authentication, implementing data log, turning on the firewall on your backup appliance. We just implemented a new firewall feature so that you can't SSH into the platform. You can only come in via this route. And we can even lock that down to, you can only come in on the web interface from this one particular IP address on this jump box. So we can really start to lock this down to prevent you from ever having to pay any kind of ransom. Good question. Tony, like you said, we knew that was going to come up today. That's the one that it's just, it's made headlines everywhere.
Thanks, folks. I don't know, Dominic, if you want to wrap it up, but yeah, we'll be sending out a follow-up email to everybody. So just let us know what you need, and we'll happy to reach out and help.
Yeah, thank you both to Tony and Derek for giving this presentation, and again to Cohesity for sponsoring. And like you said, I will be sending out this recording as well as their contact information. So if anyone wants to follow up or just ask questions that maybe come up later, feel free to reach out to them. And thank you all for coming today.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Dominic. Thank you.